All right, hello everyone and welcome to Rise Zion. My name is Seth and I hope you're all having a great Tuesday. Today we're going to be discussing some fascinating information that I discovered with regards to the so-called White Horse Prophecy. That is the fact that many Latter-day Saints, whether they believe the prophecy to be legitimate or not, are not aware that the White Horse Prophecy may not be what they think it is. Now, many of you are already familiar with this somewhat mysterious and famous document, but just as a recap, the White Horse Prophecy is a rather famous purported prophecy that is said to have been issued by Joseph Smith himself. It is written as a first-person narrative, purports to be Edward Rushton and Theodore Turley's memories of what the prophet Joseph Smith said to them with regards to the future of the Latter-day Saints. But it was written in 1890 when Rushton was an old man. Memories tend to fade over time, so you can see why this kind of memoir would be problematic, controversial, especially if they were trying to convey a greater sense of certainty than what they actually had many years after the death of Joseph Smith. It prophesies that a white horse representing the Latter-day Saints will create a wealthy haven in the Rocky Mountains to which many people of the world would gather for safety amid anarchy, war, and massive destruction. This portion of the prophecy has obviously come to pass already in many ways, which has lent some credibility to the memoir in the minds of many modern readers. The prophecy describes several other horses, a red horse, a black horse, and a pale horse, that likewise represent different groups of people. Amongst other things, it also predicts that at some future date that the Constitution will hang by a thread, a phrase which almost everyone within the Latter-day Saint culture, and even many outside of it, have heard and repeated as gospel truth. This was widely repeated while Mitt Romney was running for office, for example, due to the prediction that the elders of the church would be the ones to uphold it. The White Horse Prophecy is one of those documents that has been replicated over and over again and appears on so many different websites that it becomes difficult to discern where it originated from and to be sure that what was written in it is in fact the original words. But finally, I have discovered some valuable information with regards to the origins of this mysterious prophecy and its legitimacy. And I've made several interesting connections and ways that portions of the White Horse Prophecy are being fulfilled even today. So you're not going to want to miss this. Let's dive right into this and get started. This research was presented by Don L. Penrod in his paper Edwin Rushton as the source of the White Horse Prophecy. Edward Rushton was born on June 1st, 1824 in Leek, England. At 17, he joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and sailed to Nauvoo, arriving in April of 1842. Just a year later, at age 18, he claimed to have a remarkable experience, one he later wrote about. When the Latter-day Saints were driven from Nauvoo in 1846, Rushton stayed behind with family in St. Louis, eventually reaching Utah in 1851 with the John Brown Company. He worked as a miller, a farmer, and stockman until his death in Salt Lake City in 1904. Sometime in his later years, Rushton wrote a 10-page document by hand, now referred to as the Rushton Original. Okay, so this was the original White Horse Prophecy. His handwriting shows signs of age, so it's quavery, but it matches a signed 1855 live history he wrote earlier. Now, a copy of this rare manuscript is preserved in the Church History Library. The original remains in a private collection. Another version of the document, better written and more polished, also exists. Though Rushton's signature appears on it, the handwriting suggests it was penned by someone else, likely Arnold Juke, who may have known Rushton years later. Juke's name appears next to the word witness signature, though it's unclear what that means exactly. The ink, writing style, and signature all suggest the revised copy was created after 1868, possibly by Juke himself. The revised version of the prophecy didn't stay hidden. It began to circulate. The earliest known copy appears in the 1902 journal by John J. Roberts from Paradise, Utah. Fresh off his mission to Samoa, Roberts wrote on March 2nd, 1902, that he had copied the prophecy from a man named Robert Pierce, calling it a prophecy from Joseph Smith to Edwin Rushton and Theodore Turley that had never been given to the public. Okay, so that's a little suspicious, right? Now, little is known about Pierce or how he got his original copy. His role remains a mystery to this day. By 1918, however, the prophecy had spread widely enough throughout the church body to draw official attention. That October, during General Conference, Elder Joseph Fielding Smith publicly addressed the document, clearly concerned about its authenticity and influence, saying, "The ridiculous story about the red horse and the black horse and the white horse, and a lot of trash has been circulated about and printed and sent around as a great revelation given by the prophet Joseph Smith. Is a matter that was gotten up, I understand, some 10 years after the death of the prophet Joseph Smith by two of our brethren, who put together some broken sentences from the prophet that they may have heard him utter from time to time, and formulated this so-called revelation out of it. And it was never spoken by the prophet in this manner in which they have put it forth. It is simply false. That is all there is to it." Okay, so end quote. But what this actually means, right, is that while much of the white horse prophecy is false, that portions of it may in fact have come from or been inspired by Joseph Smith. Now, when I read this, I was certainly immediately intrigued. The white horse prophecy was a lot more controversial than I had originally thought. I was not aware that the church had come out and publicly said that this was not true, not legitimate, not trustworthy. But as I was reading this paper by Penrod, he points out that the white horse prophecy is often cited as the most reliable and original source, the original source for the phrase that the Constitution will hang by a thread. Okay, and everybody knows this part of the prophecy. Everyone talks about it. And surprisingly, even people outside of the church have used it and mentioned it in their talking to one another. However, the white horse prophecy isn't the original source, okay? And when I read this, I was shocked. The true origin of the Constitution hanging by a thread phrase can be found actually in the Journal of Discourses. Now, this prophecy was spoken at a 4th of July celebration in 1854 in the Salt Lake Tabernacle by Brigham Young himself, who attributes it to Joseph Smith, okay, who said, supposedly, "Will the Constitution be destroyed? No, it will be held inviolate by this people. And as Joseph Smith said, the time will come when the destiny of the nation will hang upon a single thread. At that critical juncture, this people will step forth and save it from the threatened destruction. It will be so. The prophecy has circulated frequently in Latter-day Saint thought and publications." End quote. In addition to this, the white horse prophecy included a prediction that the saints would become wealthy, that we mentioned before, right, and prosperous in the Rocky Mountains, something like that, right? Now, this portion of the prophecy that has already come to pass, in some regards, might also be accurately attributed to Joseph Smith as well. So Brigham Young said that it wasn't his idea to move the saints out into the middle of nowhere into the Salt Lake City Valley, but rather it was Joseph Smith's revelations. Okay, he had been talking about it for years prior to his martyrdom. So even this might be legitimate. So this just reaffirms the idea that perhaps Edward Rushton did in fact receive some interesting insights from Joseph Smith himself, in as far as he remembered them accurately, right, for all of those years after, and in as far as they were not changed or modified at all by the somewhat suspicious character Arnold Juke, or by Rushton himself, who may have wanted to emphasize his relationship with the prophet Joseph Smith when in fact he may not have had such a close relationship after all. Okay. And in case we need to remember that this still is not considered an official prophecy at all. It is not endorsed by the church at all, regardless of it appearing in many, many different publications on many different websites. It's not legitimate. Joseph Fielding Smith is making it absolutely clear that while the white horse prophecy might have portions of it that came or originated or were inspired by Joseph Smith, it is not a reliable source. Okay, and this is very important. Satan often likes to mix truths with falsehoods, and it makes potential falsehoods that much more difficult to detect and to root out, right? Nevertheless, we now have an earlier and more reliable source for the idea that the Constitution or the country would be under threat of some kind, right, from Brigham Young. I had assumed that this quote was entirely from the White Horse Prophecy, but it appears that I was wrong. So in examining only the portions that Brigham Young confirmed in the Journal of Discourses, it is interesting to see how these parts are certainly coming true in rather interesting ways in our modern times. Near the beginning of this month, for example, Elder Cook attended a Freedom of Religious Belief conference held in the UK, and this comes right on the heels of the recent religious freedom controversy that has embroiled many parts of Europe with questions as to whether or not the West will maintain its self-proclaimed ideals of religious freedom. Now, some of the same controversies have seeped even into the United States as well. I'm sure that we're all aware of these things. But the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the elders of the church, if you will, have made their position clear in unequivocally standing up for religious freedom all over the world, not just in the United States. Right? Now, Elder Cook said in 2023, for example, while many challenges still exist and need to be addressed, the principal components and the essential foundations which commenced in the British Isles are still central today. Okay, and this is really, really, really key and interesting. Okay, so we have several different case studies and examples of how we might be able to improve. And the first example comes from recent controversies, again, in the United Kingdom. Okay, we'll just read this report. It says, a particularly striking development in the United Kingdom has been the highly publicized issue of individuals being arrested or prosecuted for engaging in silent prayer within buffer zones established around abortion clinics. This phenomenon challenges the very definition of what constitutes a manifestation of religion that can be legitimately restricted. One prominent example is that of Adam Smith Connor, who was an Army veteran who was convicted in October of 2024 for silently praying for 3 minutes within a buffer zone near an abortion clinic in Bournemouth, England. The court's rationale for conviction was that his posture, joined hands and bowed head, was interpreted as expressing disapproval for abortion. Mr. Smith Connor articulated the profound implications of this ruling, stating, "Today the court has decided that certain thoughts, silent thoughts, can be illegal in the United Kingdom. This observation highlights an alarming expansion of state control, moving beyond the regulation of disruptive physical actions to the regulation of perceived intent or even internal thought, which is then inferred from passive expression." Similarly, Isabel von Spruce in the United Kingdom was arrested twice for silent prayer in the Birmingham buffer zone, one instance occurring when the clinic was closed. Although she was later acquitted for the first arrest and received a police apology for the second, her case underscored the concerning reality that such arrests could occur for mere thoughts. She emphasized silent prayer is never criminal, but also warned of the extremely harmful implications for basic freedoms. Other individuals, including Rose Douchere, a 74-year-old grandmother, Livia Tosisi Bolt, and Friar Shangao, have faced comparable arrests or convictions in various United Kingdom cities like Glasgow and Birmingham. These arrests are rooted in public space protection orders and the Public Order Act of 2023, which criminalizes activities within 150 meters of abortion facilities if they are deemed to influence or interfere with access to the clinic. This broad phrasing potentially includes prayer, thought, peaceful presence, and consensual communications even. The application of these laws to silent, non-obstructive prayer suggests a significant conceptual shift. Okay, that's important. If an internal act or a nonverbal posture can be deemed illegal based on a perceived disapproval or influence, it fundamentally challenges the liberal understanding of freedom of conscience and expression. This pushes the boundaries of state power into regulating what one thinks or intends through passive presence, extending beyond the traditional scope of regulating disruptive actions. Okay, the buffer zone legislation, while ostensibly designed to protect access to services, has in practice become a tool that disproportionately impacts religious expression, particularly for pro-life Christians. This demonstrates how laws, even if well-intentioned, can have unintended chilling effects on fundamental rights when broadly interpreted and enforced. The practical outcome is the creation of a de facto thought crime environment where the manifestation of beliefs, even in their most private and non-disruptive forms, can lead to criminal charges. This sets a concerning precedent for other contexts where similar restrictions might be applied, potentially limiting religious expression around any institution or activity deemed sensitive. It represents a significant erosion of the public square as a space for diverse, even unpopular religious expression, effectively pushing such manifestations further into the private sphere or underground. Elder Cook, in another Freedom of Religion or Belief conference, said in 2023, the year that these laws took effect, right? The apostles, I think this underscores the fact that the apostles and prophets are well aware of what's going on. But he said the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, announced December 10th, 1948, by the United Nations General Assembly, comprises 30 rights and freedoms that speak to and belong to all, and are the basis for international human rights laws, said Elder Cook in the morning meeting. It was the first time that a universal, global agreement put human rights, not power policies, at the forefront. Okay, Article 18 states everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. End quote. These disturbing reports clearly show the dismantling of these human rights in the United Kingdom. The basic human right to believe in and practice your religious belief is not a right at all if you are not permitted to practice both in public and in private. Okay, it does bring to mind a sort of parallel to the story of Daniel and the lion's den, when people were not allowed to even pray silently. Very disturbing that our so-called modern secular society has come full circle now. We're no longer barbaric like those Babylonians, but we're now so advanced that you'll be arrested for inferring disapproval in your religious observance in public. Okay, very, very truly astonishing. But the church continues to promote the importance of religious freedom everywhere in the world. Elder Cook said,
"We want everybody, whether they've been persecuted or not, we want them to have religious freedom."
Let's read another case study here. In several European countries, especially France, laws restricting religious attire in public schools, workplaces, and sports are often justified by state neutrality, or secularism in France. This principle, known as laïcité, aims to separate religion from public life. Okay, how modern and progressive of them. While supporters claim it protects freedom of thought, critics argue that its enforcement disproportionately targets visible religious minorities, particularly Muslim women. Okay, and this also would apply to Christians who wish to wear crosses, or Jews who wish to wear, their religious attire as well. In 2004, French law banned conspicuous religious symbols in public schools, effectively excluding girls who wear headscarves. In 2024, France's Council of State upheld a ban on abayas and kamis in schools. Similar restrictions now apply to sports, preventing Muslim athletes from competing. The UN Human Rights Committee has voiced concerns, and activists like the Les Hijabistes have faced arrest and harassment for peaceful protests, some even forced to remove their hijabs in custody. French-style neutrality, quote-unquote, often penalizes visible expressions of minority faiths like hijabs, turbans, and kippas. In 2021, the EU's top court expanded this logic into the private sector, allowing employers to ban religious dress to maintain a neutral image or avoid societal disputes. Critics, including Human Rights Watch, say this legalizes workplace discrimination and primarily harms Muslim women. However, this, of course, would harm anybody who wishes to display their religious attire in public. Okay, that would include Christians, that would include Jews as well. In Germany, for example, Muslim women have left teaching due to bans on religious attire. These policies signal a troubling trend, growing state control over individual religious expression, end quote. Again, this emphasizes that even in places that are generally considered modern, that freedom of religious observance can be suppressed in surprising ways. Again, if your ability to worship is constrained at all, to only worship in private, it isn't a religious right in any way. Being able to publicly express what you believe through what you wear and your actions is the only way that faith can be actualized in society. It's the only way it actually has any significance or meaning in your life.
It was a real privilege and pleasure to hear what he had to say about the historic connections and the shared rootedness in what for us are important collegiate traditions based on the dissenting traditions around freedom of religion and belief, and the idea that it is so important that everyone has a space to be able to develop their faith traditions and to explore and to practice in freedom wherever they are.
We have a third and final case study. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed a tendency in some secular European states, and even in the United States, to sideline communal worship when balancing public health with civil liberties. While lockdowns were broadly implemented, religious gatherings often faced stricter limitations than comparable secular events, promoting accusations of double standards. In Spain, for example, in June 2020, restrictions limited churches in Madrid and Barcelona to 30% capacity and funerals to only 10 people. Yet thousands were allowed to gather for anti-racism protests. In England, senior faith leaders opposed the November 2020 ban on worship, calling it unjustifiable by evidence. Such decisions sparked concern that religion was being pushed to the bottom of a hierarchy of rights, below economic activity or political expressions. Legal challenges in the United States drew attention to the same issue, religious communities bearing heavier burdens than secular entities. This signals a broader trend. During crises, public worship is often viewed as more dispensable than other forms of gathering, reflecting a secularist's assumptions that religion belongs only in the private sphere. Unequal restrictions have damaged trust between religious communities and the state. Resistance from faith leaders reflects deeper concerns about fairness, proportionality, and the erosion of religious freedom under emergency powers. The lesson is clear. In future crises, governments must engage religious communities, explain restrictions transparently, and ensure equal treatment, lest they weaken both public trust and social cohesion. Okay. Now, a major theme in all of these case studies is the tendency for religious liberty to take last place in considerations of public policy. This is another serious way that religious freedom is slowly being eroded. And here we have a quote from Elder David A. Bednar, who says, when governments around the world swiftly banned religious gatherings as COVID-19 advanced, they dangerously breached boundaries protecting the free exercise of religious freedom and proved just how fragile it is. Elder Bednar emphasized that he isn't saying that no government restrictions were warranted in these extreme circumstances. However, quote, he said, we cannot deny and we should not forget the speed and intensity with which government power was used to shut down fundamental aspects of religious exercise. These decisions and regulations were unprecedented. For nearly 2 months, Americans and many others throughout the free world learned firsthand what it means for the government to directly prohibit the free exercise of religion. We have witnessed the government's swift, well-intentioned, but often dangerous breaching of the boundaries that protect the free exercise of religion. Do we hear the buzzer on the alarm clock? This is a wake-up call for all of us, he said. Those fundamental boundaries and protections must be healed, renewed, and fortified. Elder Bednar called the shutdown of worship a wake-up call and urgent that the power of government must have limits. Okay, so Elder Cook again praised Britain's religious heritage, its Magna Carta, its Bill of Rights, affirming that acknowledgement of the Creator is foundational to liberty. He spoke about how the religious freedoms, as exemplified in the early 1800s, allowed for early Latter-day Saint missionaries to preach in the United Kingdom.
The number of people who joined the church in that period from 1837 to 1850 was larger, and there were more members of our faith in England in 1850 than there were in the United States.
It's astonishing that at a time when the saints were being so persecuted in their own country, that during this time the church membership had grown in the UK beyond the number of US members. However, it is clear, as Elder Cook pointed out, that there is still definitely room for improvement in our modern day, no matter where we are in the world, to champion religious freedom and expression. In light of these sobering developments, it is clear that the threats, once seen as distant prophecies, in the White Horse Prophecy, for example, are now taking shape before our very eyes. While the White Horse Prophecy may not be accurate, and it certainly is not, the church has affirmed that it is not, nevertheless, it reflects a real and pressing spiritual truth echoed in the words of modern prophets and apostles, that the Constitution and the God-given principles of religious liberty will at some point hang by a thread. That part clearly came from the prophet Joseph Smith. But God is not silent. As evidenced by Elder Cook's unwavering defense of freedom of conscience on the global stage, the elders of Israel are indeed stepping forward to uphold eternal truths in a world that seeks to silence them. Freedoms of all kinds are, in fact, a part of our delicate stewardships. We should each be involved wherever we are in the world and speak out to defend our constitutional rights and the rights of people all around the world.
I want to make sure that we give it with all its richness to the generations that are coming.
I agree.
I think that's why dialogue and friendship and cooperation are important. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you very much.
A lot of the challenges that we see around the world in relation to freedom of religion or belief, they tend to be blamed on faith and things where, what we're looking at here are faiths that want to come together, faiths that want to work together. And the hope that I get from this is that there is a possibility for faiths to have common aims, common goals, work on the same things, but keep that mutual respect amongst each other. And I think if we can get those faiths together, working on freedom of religion or belief, helping those violations, showing that it's not actually the faiths being in opposition, but the faiths are part of a solution.
Like Elder Cook, we should join together with people of other faiths, stand in unity to bring about real change in the world. And I say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Now, before you go, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Our goal is to reach 40,000 subscribers in 2 months. We've almost achieved that goal, you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching. And if you'd like, please also consider becoming a member of the channel to help our little channel to keep growing and to help support our volunteers who've so diligently been working behind the scenes to make this channel a success. When you become a member, you are rewarded with some cool perks, including custom emojis and a custom name badge that goes next to your name that I also designed. And we will also be doing a raffle for members. Every time I finish a painting, I will be doing a raffle and giving out a free poster-sized print of my artwork that I am painting. Okay, so make sure to check that out. We're going to be starting our live streams again of our painting live streams again on the 23rd of June. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, bye.